are going to begin our study in the book of Leviticus today. Raise your hand if you've actually read the book of Leviticus. Okay, so some of you have read it. So let me ask you a question. What do you think the book of Leviticus is about? Have you thought about that? Because most of the time people look at it and go, oh my gosh, it's a book of a whole bunch of rules.
How to worship, serve, and obey God.
Hey, what's your first answer to that?
After your redemption from creating images, now this is how you behave.
Yeah, so Dina said, and Lee just echoed, how to what, Dina?
Worship.
How to worship,
Serve, and obey.
serve, and obey God. So write that down. The book of Leviticus is truly about how to worship, serve, and obey God, but there is a prepositional phrase that needs to go on the end. And now you're all going, okay, what's a prepositional phrase? Bailey.
It's something you can do, like if you were saying, I can go under the desk or on the desk or jump over the desk.
Those are good examples. If you take the I cans out of it,
Okay. So
those are all examples of prepositional phrases.
it adds interest to the sentence, and if you cross it out, the sentence still makes sense.
Exactly correct. Exactly correct. It adds emphasis to the sentence, and you can cross it out, and the sentence still makes sense. So we're missing a prepositional phrase at the end. So you should have written so far. It is teaching us to worship, serve, and obey God by faith. You see, what he's teaching you to do now in this book is to walk by faith. Now, you have to understand the backdrop to know why that would even be applicable.
Well, is this just a side note, but kind of the same thing? Like when we read the beginning, it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth and the sun and all that. Then he tells us how. We just read in Exodus how God gave the Ten Commandments and told them all this stuff, and they agreed, but now he's going to show them how in more detail.
How to go forward.
With the information they already got or has gotten.
And they've got part of the information. He's going to expand the information to give them better how. So, for example, if you were working with me and I showed up on the job and you said, okay, go build that house. And I said, I've never done that before. And that's where you left me with go build that house. You could end up with just about anything, right? So in order for me to build what you want me to build, then there's going to be some understanding of the plans, right? You follow? So there has to be a plan. Otherwise, how do I possibly hit the target that you want me to aim at? Then I have to receive the plan. So when you read your Bibles and you hear God say one of two words, hear or listen, that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about the audible noises that make your eardrum bounce back and forth so that you get a vibration. He's talking about really soaking in what he's telling you, that it becomes a part of your soul, a part of your mind. And it's only in this way will you understand what's commonly called in circles not in which you walk, the Shema. If those of you who've heard that term before, it's called the Shema in Hebrew. It's actually a title of something. It's also a word in Hebrew that means listen or hear. And it's found in Deuteronomy chapter 6. We'll get there someday. But you will know it most commonly when Jesus was confronted by the Pharisees and he was asked, what is the greatest commandment? Jesus repeats the Shema. That's essentially what he does. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. That is the essence of the Shema. Okay? So then I have to receive that plan. Now, if he gives me the plan and I have the plan, am I done? No. If I don't implement the plan, having the plan does me how much good? Zero. If I go to Lee here and say, Doc, I'm sick, and he says, here's what you have, young man, and you need to do this, get better. And I say, great, thanks, and I walk out, and I do nothing that he tells me. Did he give me the plan? Yeah. Did I hear the plan? Yeah. What? Yeah. What value is the plan to me then if I don't execute it? Now, why would these people execute the plan? See, that's the question you ultimately have to answer. Why would you do it? Why will you do it or not do it? You see. Bailey. Because it's about faith. You remember 2 weeks ago we talked about faith is a gift from God. God gives us faith. We have to do something with it. It can't just sit there and rot. What we do with faith is rightly exercise it back unto the giver that gave us the gift. That's the purpose of faith. So, back to my story about going to see my favorite doctor here. If I say to him, yeah, but doc, I want to do this instead. What am I demonstrating at that moment when I make that comment?
Lack of belief.
Lack of faith.
Lack of belief and trust. That's exactly correct. You see? Yeah, go to Dr. Google, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
And that's all medical research.
Yes, of course it is. So you have to understand that why you would make the choice to do or not do is because you either believe or you don't believe. Why will you do it? Because you have faith in that person or you don't have faith. This is why God declares vividly, faith without works is dead.
Where would the don't care fit into those two?
Where would the what?
You just don't care.
If you don't care?
Yeah, if you don't care.
Well, that's obviously called apathy, but nevertheless it is no faith in God.
The ultimate no faith.
That's the ultimate no faith, is not caring at all. And really what you want to do at that point is change the I don't care into I do care. So back to our medical example, if I have something wrong with me, and I come in and Doc says, hey, look, if you don't take care of this in a short period of time, it's going to get worse and you might die.
You're going to die.
If I walk out and say, I don't care, guess what's going to happen?
Well, can I give you an example?
Yes, go ahead.
Jim Malley had brain cancer.
Yep.
Went in, doctors told him what to do, he had to do it, or you're going to die 6 months. He did all the stuff they said to do and then some.
Right.
Another guy that he knows now, because of the brain cancer, had the exact same thing.
Yep.
Went in, they operated, they took the tumor out about the size of a walnut instead of like his size of a baseball. He said, I'm done. Left.
Yeah.
6 months later, he was back in there, it was the size of a grapefruit. So,
yeah.
it was like he didn't care, to do the rest of the stuff. He knew enough to do the first part, but he didn't do the rest of it, so then it comes back and it's worse, which is just like the demons. Swept the house out, got it clean, didn't do anything about it, and they come back 10 times as much. So
right, that's exactly right. So, in these examples, you see what God is laying out is something that is going to be quite specific and quite different than what these people are used to. So let's retrace a little bit of history. We have completed now Genesis and Exodus. In Genesis, God creates heaven and earth and all that is therein from himself. By the way, it's a misnomer to say he creates it from nothing. In a scientific sense, when we're looking at it from a purely scientific sense, then we say things like that, creating something from nothing. Because we are saying, where was the matter that created the additional matter? Where was the energy that created the additional energy? And the answer is God. But science can't handle that answer. So that's why in science they'll say creating something from nothing, which, by the way, in physics is a physical impossibility. And so even physics tells you, you're right, it is physically impossible. That's why we have God, you see. And so it's important that they understand that all time, space, and matter have an origin in something greater than time, space, and matter. That would be God. And he then gives us the very first demonstration of faith in the Bible. What would that be? With Adam. Tell me, what is the first demonstration of faith in the Bible regarding Adam?
Lord told him not to eat the fruit of tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Right. What's the rest of what he told him?
After that, he told him you can have dominion over everything else. Just don't eat of that one tree.
Or what?
You will you will die.
Right. And so, how much knowledge of death would Adam have at the moment when God told him that? Not only probably zero, absolutely zero. Because at that point, there was no single example he could point to of death of any kind.
Right.
So he would have absolutely no understanding of what we're talking about. It's kind of like somebody who goes in who finds out they have, we've heard terms, and so we're kind of familiar with the terms, but we don't know. If I go in to see Lee again, and he says, yeah, you've got, in Jim's case, brain cancer. Yeah, and they give you these big, long, $40 words. And so we say, okay, because we have some familiarity with some of the terms, but you know how many people really understand what they have? Almost none. And what they have to do is put their trust in a doctor to lead them on a path to try to help cure them of what they have, if possible. Okay? But we have familiarity with some of these terms. Imagine hearing something for the very first time and having no associative capacity to understand the term. You can't point to anything that says, I understand what death is. Ooh, I don't want that. Simply by the Word of God, you would have faith, without having to have any knowledge of the full meaning of what he just said to you. That's our very first example of the test of faith. And for a while, it went well. How did it go wrong? What happened that Adam abandoned his faith in God? Because you see, he didn't just lose it or misplace it. It didn't leak out of his fingers. It didn't have a limited supply that he spent over the days and now he was out of it.
Chose to believe someone else over God.
He chose the temptation to depart from God over clinging to God. And so therefore he abandoned his faith in God. And what did he do now? Placed his faith in someone else. You see, faith didn't stop existing. It was just transferred. So faith in faith itself is also of no use. If faith is not targeted at the correct object, it will lead to destruction. Thus Jesus said, the blind lead the blind, and they both fall in the ditch. Well, the second blind guy had faith in the first blind guy to lead him in the right way. What happened? In the ditch they went. And so this is why it's so important to understand not just the concept of faith, but who the proper object is of your faith. And it's not you. The biggest problem we have with faith is we put way too much in ourselves and way too little in God. Yes, sir. Faith in the creations of man instead of God. That's exactly right. So what you're going to learn in this book is what God is laying out for them to have a properly executed faith in Him that will be demonstrated by worship, service, and obedience. That's how it will be demonstrated. You see, this is the works that justify the faith. And this is how Abraham was justified. Because God said, take your son Isaac, your only son, take him up on Mount Moriah and offer him as a sacrifice to me. Up the mountain he went, already prepared to slay his son, and God said, stop. I know you'll withhold nothing from me. Your son will remain alive, and I will provide the sacrifice, not you. And so we have lots of examples of faith in the scriptures that we've already read. We have good examples of faith. Abel's offer to the Lord. Noah's 100-year construction of an ark. Right? Abram's departure from Ur of the Chaldees. Isaac's acceptance of Rebekah as his wife. Rebekah's willingness to go and make Isaac her wife. Jacob's...
Isaac her wife.
Huh?
Isaac her wife.
Make Isaac her husband, sorry. Sounds like I misspoke.
You're on a roll.
I was on a roll, just let me go, that's right. Jacob's departure to Syria and his return back to Canaan, and then thus his departure off to Egypt. Joseph perseveres in the face of tremendous persecution at the hand of his own family, strangers into where he goes, falsely accused, falsely imprisoned, forgotten and abandoned, and he remains faithful to God the entire way. You see, that's real faith. Lots of people claim to have faith. You know what God says every single time? Show me your faith by your works. That's God's answer. Otherwise, you have none in me. You have some, but it's not in me. Go ahead, Alex.
So, everyone has faith.
Everyone has faith. You can't be absent faith.
Okay, that changes my understanding then of the verses we went over in Ephesians 2:8-10, where it says faith is a gift from God. That literally, by the fact that He has created us and we exist, we have faith. It's not something that we receive at some point later on in our life. We have the ability to believe in something.
So
or not.
Faith in and of itself, as its own concept, is one element, but then the object in which you would put your faith.
All kinds of things.
And so Ephesians 2:8-10 have the direct implication, especially when you give the rest of the surrounding verses, that the gift of God is not just the innocuous concept of faith, but it is faith in Him that is the gift.
Using that tool He's given us in a particular way, we receive salvation through grace.
That's correct. It's faith in Him that is re-exercised back toward Him, and that's why verse 10 cannot be decoupled from 8 and 9 and have any chance of understanding the context of what is being delivered, because that faith will only become real when properly exercised back unto God for His good pleasure, according to the good works that He's prepared beforehand that we must do to demonstrate that that faith gift that He's given to us is now rightly exercised back to the gift giver. Now, to these folks who are in the desert, they come from a very polytheistic background, which means multiple gods being supposedly worshipped multiple ways. And you have to understand, in their minds, these gods were nothing like Yehovah. First of all, these gods were fragmented in their abilities. They were limited in what they could or could not do. Secondly, they were capricious, which means you couldn't really know how to please them, because they would arbitrarily act in certain ways that would bring panic upon the people. Okay? And so what he is doing is he is teaching them to have faith in Him by doing what? By speaking His word to them, by conducting Himself always consistent with His word, and telling them, if you will follow me, I will show you that I am trustworthy. That's what he's telling them. So how does he demonstrate this? Well, he goes and rescues them out of Egypt. And he tells them to do certain things while they're in Egypt, while they're in the world, you see. And while he tells them to do certain things, the ones that do them are blessed, and the ones that don't experience the consequences of the curses. Now, God's preference was that everybody would do what he said, and he didn't have to give anybody curses, but he doesn't always get his way. And so those who had faith in God, what did they do? They listened to what he told them to do. They followed his instructions and clung to him for the blessings that he promised them. Now that had to be demonstrated. In the case of the Israelites, while in Egypt, they had to trust that in the midst of God telling Pharaoh to let my people go, and harsher pressure being brought upon them, that God would in fact save them. In the beginning, what did we learn? Their faith wasn't real strong, was it? So how were they led to continue to believe? God used a messenger, didn't he? Moses. And Moses did not depart from the word of the Lord. He was the example to them on how to demonstrate faith in Yehovah. And he persisted to do exactly what the Lord called him to do, putting himself in harm's way. And in the process, what took place? As the people watched Pharaoh and the Egyptians be cursed, what did they discover when we read the scriptures? And Moses was esteemed higher and higher in the sight of the people. They're thinking, wow, this guy has some real pull with the God. Well, because they don't know Yehovah at this point. You see.
They thought it was another God.
A lot of them thought it was just another God, but this guy's, he's got some power. And in the process, he brings 10 plagues that whip 10 of their gods. And he tells them now, here's the plan. On the final night, here's the plan. I'm going to come through camp. Everyone who has the blood on the lintels and the doorpost of their house and remains inside, I won't touch. But those who don't have the blood, I'm going to kill the firstborn in their home. And this will be the occasion for you now coming out of Egypt and following me to the place I'm going to take you. A land that is wonderful, calls it flowing with milk and honey. They have no idea where it is. But the invitation is, you'll find out if you'll follow me. And so they had to demonstrate faith in God to follow what seemingly would be innocuous instructions. Go kill a lamb, smear its blood on the doorpost, and on the...
And stay in.
Pardon me?
And stay in.
And stay in. And oh, by the way, be dressed ready to go. And cook the sacrifice and eat it quickly. Don't leave it till morning. Because you're going to need some sustenance for this journey, is what he was doing. You see? He had all the details planned out. Nothing forgotten. And at the end of the day, I'm going to lead you out of here. And the only way you get out is follow me. And so he executes the plan, and off they go. And 50 days later, through a couple of trials, getting low on water, getting low on food, God provides water from the rock. God brings manna from the heavens, demonstrating his faithfulness to be their, not just their protector, their rescuer and their protector, but also to be their provider. And they get to the mountain, and God says, if you will hear my voice, I will bless you. I will make you a special people. And I will protect you against your enemies, and I will provide for you. But if you don't, Your enemies are not the ones you need to fear. It would be me. And he brings them all to the mountain and says, don't touch the mountain, I'll kill you. But gather around the mountain and listen to what I have to say. And he thunders the 10 Commandments to them. And they tremble. Uh-oh. And they go and ask Moses, hey, you've been helping us out here. Can you help us out again? Can you make sure he doesn't talk to us anymore? You just talk to us, because we're not afraid of you. We're afraid of him. And so Moses goes up on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And they start getting antsy, reverting back to their old lives in Egypt. You see the temptation, the same thing for us to do. And they decide, we know what to do. At that moment, what takes place? What faith they had in God is now cast off for faith in, not the calf, not Aaron, themselves. You see, when you make your own choice to cast off the Word of God for anything else, you've made more faith in yourself than you have in God. Doesn't matter what the other thing is. You have now declared by the decision, even though the words don't come out of your mouth, I'm smarter than God. I'm wiser than God. I know he's talked about this. I don't need to listen. I've got a better plan. I'm smarter than he is. So the one that they were not afraid of comes down from the mountain, breaks the tablets, grinds the golden calf into dust, and kills 3,000 of them. Now that he's got their attention, he goes back up on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And when he comes down, he delivers a new set of covenant tablets and gives them instructions. What do the people do? They say they'll do it. Then what do they do? They do it. You see, they go and follow what they had been instructed to do. He sends them back to their own tents. Doesn't line them up and check their pockets. He sends them back to their own tents. And he says, okay, all of you who are of a willing heart, come and give to God what he's asked of you. Now, here's the challenge. Some people think that means, well, then they had an option not to do it, because if they weren't of a willing heart, then they didn't have to do it. Those that think that way have completely misread the Scriptures. See, this is a test. It's a test to find out whether they had any gratitude for the one who has, in fact, rescued them, protected them, and provided for them. It's a test. And now he's asking you, are you willing to trust me? That's the test. And so the people bring an overwhelming amount of things where they have to say, whoa, stop. We got more than enough. We're good. And then the people spend the next year approximately building exactly what God had designed with the very plans that he gave them so that it would come out precisely as God had described. So that would be me taking Carrie's plans and saying, okay, come back in a year and this will be done, just like the plan. Now, if Carrie called me up at the end of the year and said, hey, got that house done? And I said, oh yeah, all done, just like you asked. Great, thanks. Okay, I appreciate it. And hangs up the phone and never drives out there and looks. What does he know he has?
Faith in you.
That's about it, huh?
Yeah,
He doesn't know if there's anything at all.
He doesn't even know if I've laid one board yet.
Or got any permits.
Yeah.
That takes a year to buy.
We don't care about permits.
we don't need nothing.
So, you understand, in order for him to know, he has to do what Moses did. What did he do? He went and inspected everything that the people told him they built. And when it passed, he blessed them. And essentially said, well done, good and faithful servants. And then he erects the tabernacle court and all of the components in them and sets them in order. Now they're ready for the presence of God to dwell among them, you see. Now they're ready for the presence of God to dwell among them. And God is now going to show them, teach them, train them. You see, remember when we studied a couple of weeks ago what the purpose of the law is? It's to be a teacher or a tutor. They're coming from a background of multiple gods that are, first of all, don't really exist. This is why they seem capricious, because they predict one thing and then they act a different way, or they ascribe actions to them a different way. So for them, they were thinking, okay, great, we're doing what we thought we were supposed to do to please this God, but now we get a fire, or now we get a drought, or now we get sickness, or whatever happens. And so what happened? God wasn't pleased well enough. And so it's this very strange, misunderstood attempt at trying to please gods that don't exist. God says, on the other hand, I'm going to give you very detailed instructions. And if you do them, I will bless you. If you don't do them, I will be the one to curse you. So pay close attention, he says. Now, here's the test. Here's the test. He has already required of them certain offerings. Leviticus begins with offerings. What is the first offering that God has required of them?
First offering.
No, ma'am. That's in Leviticus. So you're right. We will get to Leviticus and we will talk about those offerings. But God has already, before we get to Leviticus, required offerings. What is the offering He's already required of them?
Gold.
Livestock is the first offering in Leviticus, correct. So let me rephrase the question because I think I'm not being heard. Before you ever get to the book of Leviticus, before you ever even get to Exodus, what is the first offering God has required? Exactly correct. Your life.
So did I.
The first offering He requires is your life to be dedicated to Him. The second thing He requires is for you to understand that your time is His. Remember, He created time, space, and matter. Those are things He created. And then the third thing He requires is not just some of the things you have, but everything you have. And how He's going to find out whether or not you're okay with this, how you're going to find out whether you're okay with this, is He then is going to require of you to give a part of it to Him as a test. You see, He's very clear that nothing you have is yours. Not your life, not your time, not your family relations, not your friends, not your relatives, not your money, not your house, not your livestock, not your gold, not your grain, nothing. That's right. Not your firstborn son. Ask Abraham. That's right. And so what He's going to do is He is going to use the offerings as a test. That's one of the main functions of the offering. What is it a test of?
Faith.
Your faith in God. That's exactly correct. Second thing He's going to use them for is to teach you something. Remember, the law is a tutor. It's instructional. It's supposed to help you gain understanding. And the third purpose is to make practical supply to those who are the ministers of his covenant. That's the third purpose. Now, none of these three principles change ever until Jesus comes back.
No.
What?
They don't ever change.
Oh, no, they will.
You think they do when he comes back?
Yeah, because he's not going to have to teach us anything anymore when he comes back to start with.
Okay. So
He says, now we know in part, but then we will know in full.
Okay.
So there are certain aspects of it that will not remain the same when he comes back. But until then, not a single principle changes.
Okay.
Comfortable with that now?
Yep.
Okay.
God never changes, and so
God never changes, but the application of his principles are revelatory in time and seasons and layers. Okay, that means he unveils things in sequences, if you will. For example, in the offerings, he's going to be teaching us something. One of the primary things he's teaching us is the coming Messiah and what he's going to do, and what the purpose of him doing that is, and how it's going to benefit us. It's one of the primary things he's teaching us. The other thing he's teaching us primarily is ourselves in the offerings and sacrifices, and the implications for us, and what we're supposed to do, and how it benefits us. Okay? So these are the things to remember when you read Leviticus, so that when you read, you should be asking the questions, okay, how do I answer those questions given what I'm reading now? Like Bailey said, the first one's the burnt offering, right? What's the point of the burnt offering?
lunch.
You follow? Well, actually, the point of the burnt offering wasn't lunch because none of it was eaten. So in the burnt offering case, that's one of the things that's not lunch.
Demonstration of your understanding of God's directions.
So, in part, Lee is correct. He said a demonstration of your understanding of God's directions. In part, that is correct because he's going to give you a plan. Let's confine it to just the burnt offerings. He says, here's the plan for the burnt offerings. And by the way, when you read Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, you'll find this plan continue to unfold. So we're going to get a part right now in Leviticus 1. And it's not the whole. Now, why do you think God gives it to them in pieces?
Well, part of it is, and I don't know where this fits in this category, but part of it is we got to learn to do what God said just because God said it. We don't need to know why.
Right.
We just need to, God said it, I'm going to do it.
Right.
Period. We don't need to have an explanation, even though he goes into great detail to explain why certain things took place. At some point, I got to have enough faith to say, God said so, so it's so. My God, Jehovah, not any God. And
Yehovah says so, so it's so.
It's so, regardless of, there's no more arguing, no point settled, case closed. Done.
Case closed, done. Correct. But here's the challenge with that thinking. Say again?
He gives us these directions in pieces because we have to walk before we can run.
Correct. It's a learning process, you see. If, Carrie, you were to give the plans to Bailey and say, build me this house, and you don't teach her to start with how to use a tape measure, what are you going to end up with?
A dollhouse of cards.
You follow? Not only is he telling us what to do, but he's teaching us how to do it. There is much effort spent barking at people, telling them what they must do. There's far too little effort expended to teach them how to do it.
I was going to say,
And you see, proper discipling and mentoring is teaching them how to do. See, Jesus didn't say, go teach them what my commandments are. He said, teach them to do the commandments I've given to you.
She was a poor example because she has a tape measure.
Well, and she's brilliant, so she could probably just look at the tape measure and figure it out. So,
I was trying to think of what kind of house I would get. She would build a house.
Well, Candy's answer was the right answer. You get a tiny house. So, you were going to say something, Alex.
I would just we get that concept of progressive teaching in everything else in life, and then seem to try and abandon that when we come to God and His instructions.
We don't try. We either abandon or we don't, but we're not somewhere in the middle trying to abandon something we're not abandoning.
We get it everywhere else. Where it's like, yeah, build a house. Everybody understands. You got to start. How to read a blueprint, how to measure a board.
So how does God intercede to make this happen?
Well, what's wrong with, or what he's saying is, if you ask me to build a house, I would go build you a house, a great house, but it's not the house you want is the problem. Because I didn't take the time to really find out what kind of house you wanted or to get the plans. I just said, yeah, I can build a house, you bet. I've been doing it forever. Go build your house. Well, that's not what I wanted. So we get instruction, but if we fail to find out exactly what the instruction is, we have built something wonderful, but it's not what...
No, this is a great example that you give me. So his example is, he has tremendous experience in building houses. And I say to Carrie, go build me a house. And he says, okay, heads off, and goes and builds the house. Now, who is the object of his faith? Himself. You see, because what he didn't care to do was to ask the question,
How many bathrooms?
what do you want me to build exactly? You follow? And so that instantly is faith in yourself. Good example. Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. It's clear instruction. Lots of people have been barked at telling you have to do this. If you're not taught how to do it, what are you going to do?
Whatever you think for, Lord.
What did the first half of the verse say?
Training and admonition of the Lord.
Do not provoke them to wrath.
Yeah, so you get caught with it.
You see, here's the challenge. If you don't know how, it's going to require two things. Okay? It's going to require two things. It's going to require God doing His part, and the ones He sent to you to train you to do their part. Now, He's rescued a nation out of Egypt. How many people does He have trained up yet? 0. He's just rescued them out of disaster. How many of them know how to follow Him yet? He's just starting from scratch. So starting from scratch, what does He do? He proclaims in His Word that He puts His Spirit into certain people and gives them special wisdom as to how to execute what He's told them to do. And that their job was to do what? Train others to do it. That was their job. So He begins the process by planting this into them. But then He says, the way it's going to work is, we're going to work synchronistically. We're going to work together. And we're going to train the other people. That's how they're going to learn. That's how they're going to know. And that's been His plan ever since the kickoff of the nation Israel. And today, His plan's not any different. What are the requirements on the other side of the fence? The person has to be interested in learning, and they have to pursue the understanding. Not wait until it's forced on them. Otherwise, it won't be received. If you don't receive with a willing heart, and with a willing heart give back, it will fail. And that's the test. And as we go forward now, we get into Leviticus, and the first thing he starts talking about are offerings. So they've constructed the tabernacle court, all of its furnishings, all set up, glorious colors, plenty of gold and silver and bronze, glittering all brand new. And he says, now, Yehovah called to Moses and spoke to him, Leviticus chapter 1, from the tabernacle of meeting, saying, pause. Verse 1, tell me what just happened. See, that's what we hear is God talked to Moses. Here's what did happen. God called to Moses, Moses had to respond and come to him to hear him. Where was the Lord? Moses was called from outside the tabernacle to come in and listen to me. And he did, and was able to receive what God had for him. In the same way, we have to respond and come to him. He calls. We have to respond and come to him. It's not going to happen by osmosis. Which means you can't just go along in your life by your own design, and God's going to supernaturally implant into you everything you need to be glorious and wonderful. That's not going to happen. He calls, and we must come to him. Verse 2, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when any one of you brings an offering to the Lord, you shall bring your offering of the livestock, of the herd, of the flock. We're going to pause once again here. How many of you remember when you read in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus is confronting the Pharisees and he says, why do you ruin the nation by your traditions? When you say to a young man, and he says to his parents, anything that you have received from me is korban. And in parentheses it says, a gift to God. And then he goes on and says, therefore, I'm not obligated to do anything for you. Do you remember reading that? Well, this statement of Jesus comes from this very passage, you see. The word korban is the word for offering in what we're reading right now. And so what he's referring to when he's giving them this correction, he's rebuking them, he's referring to these very offerings and the whole setup of this offering system. Because you see, all offerings are under the umbrella of korban. And then he's going to distinguish between different offerings and have various purposes.
Where was that in Mark?
I think it's in Mark chapter 7.
Yeah.
I think it's in Mark chapter 7, but I'll have to look it up real quick.
Yep.
Is it
I found it.
chapter and verse?
New, I just looked it up.
Chapter and verse?
That particular verse is
7:11, yeah. Mark chapter 7, verse 11. So, this is what he's talking about. So that's why they would have been incredibly familiar with what he's talking about now. It's not just some new theme he's talking about. He's specifically referring them back to this whole setup of offerings to God, which is going to be in detail laid out now. Okay? Verse 3, if his offering is a burnt offering of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own free will at the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord. There's a particular word for this offering. Burnt offering is olah in Hebrew. And we will find that the first time this was done was all the way back as soon as Noah got off the ark. You see, burnt offerings aren't brand new. But what burnt offerings were supposed to be, what they were supposed to teach, and how they were to be presented, that is all going to be taught to them now, you see. Because people have been offering burnt animals for a long time now already. So the concept of offering an animal sacrifice is not new. But how to do it rightly, and how to do it by faith, is a very important subject that he's going to teach them. And if you notice, he says, he shall offer it of his own free will and in a prescribed place at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, not anywhere else. Does he have to say not anywhere else? Or do we already understand that when he says present it at the door of the tabernacle of meeting?
It should be.
Already clearly understood, right? Verse 4, then he shall put his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. This word atonement means a covering. It's like throwing a blanket over it. Okay? Now, why is he putting his hand on the head of the animal? Transferring whatever the guilt is. Because this is not a sin offering, it's a burnt offering. Okay? So something is supposed to be being transferred from the one who brought the ox by putting his hand physically on the ox. What if you just bring the ox and you don't put your hand on the head?
You didn't do what God told you to do.
You didn't follow the plan, did you? Okay? Now, Howard, why would you believe that whatever was the problem was in fact transferred to the animal?
Because it's a sacrifice of atonement.
So, why would you believe it? How many times does the Lord say to other people, yes, you see, it's by faith you're going to believe this and no other. God says a lot of things, and we will follow them only by faith, you see. The only way you can know, because guess what, when you touch the animal, like when we came over, when you guys touched Ann today, did anybody see any magic lights go on? Did Ann's head get bigger? You see, did her hair change color? There's no physical sign that tells you anything took place. How do you know it took place? You see, you only get there by faith. There's no other way to get there. And why do you think it will be a covering for whatever you have guilt for?
Because God said He'd do it.
Because God said it would be.
This atonement will work.
This atonement will work. You see, they didn't have a single example of this anywhere in their polytheistic systems where a God ever said that to them, because those gods can't speak.
Yeah.
Okay? And now he said, this is exactly what I want you to do, and this is what it will produce. Now, Howie, if I say to you, after wrestling practice, young man, I want you to come immediately home. And if you do, I'll give you an ice cream cone. If you, after wrestling practice, don't come home for another hour and show up and say, I'm here for my ice cream cone, what do you think the answer will be?
No, I told you to come straight home.
Why did you think that? I didn't say it.
Well,
You're absolutely correct, by the way. You would not get the ice cream cone, and your answer is perfect. Now I want you to answer for me why it's perfect.
because you didn't do what you were asked to do.
You didn't do what you were instructed to do. It can be formed as a question, but it's still an instruction. And in my case, I didn't even give it as a question. I said, after wrestling practice, come immediately home. That's an instruction. It's not a question. And so, automatically, the converse is already true. If you don't come home immediately after wrestling practice, you will not get the ice cream cone. And you clearly understand this at the ripe old age of 62, right? An awfully young-looking 62. You see, even children can understand such basic things. So when we start looking at the scriptures and we say, well, it doesn't say that, stop all that. Just stop all that. Read and understand God, His Word, as He speaks, knowing the basic things even a child knows. This is why Jesus says, unless you're converted and become as a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. Because even a child can do this. It's only adults that foul it all up. Okay? We do all the twisting and turning and contorting because guess what? We don't want to surrender to God. That's why we do it.
We have more faith in our own reasoning.
We have more faith in ourselves, you see. And we are unwilling to abandon it, which is God calls pride. In the tree of knowledge. That's exactly right. So, he says, back to verse 4 again. Then he shall put his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf. Accepted by whom? By God. Yes. He didn't say that. How did you know that, Lee? You must be becoming as a child, you see. Yes, sir. Clear inference, right? The one giving the instruction is already giving you the answer. It will be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. He shall kill the bull before Yehovah and the priests, Aaron's sons, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood all around on the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Who kills the ox or the bull?
The one who's making the offering.
The one who's making the offering takes his own sword or knife or whatever out and slits the throat of the animal. They don't deliver it and send it off somewhere where they don't have to watch. Okay? They put their own hand on their own device that is going to end the life of the animal for the purpose of taking upon the animal the guilt of whatever they should have been condemned for and will be freed by because the animal takes it on. And they have to pull the trigger, slit the throat, whatever you want to call it. He or she. Okay? Very clear we must understand this piece. Now, at that point, the opportunity for the offerer ends. Because the work now is the priest's. Sorry, take it back. In this case, he does one more thing. He skins the burnt offering and cuts it into pieces, verse 6. So after he kills it, his responsibility is, anybody ever, other than Carrie, anybody ever skin an animal? Yeah, so skinning an animal is quite a process, isn't it?
You're saying that literally everybody that was older than about age 20 would have known how to skin an animal at this point in this nation.
You would think they probably did because it's a very agrarian society.
They bring it there.
They have to bring it there and skin it. Now, if they didn't, they could be like me, and I go, Carrie, can you show me how to skin an animal? Because I have no idea how to do it.
They're going to be bringing their own offering. They have to know how to do it.
Yeah, but they don't have to know in advance. They can be taught. But once again, now, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. And you live in this time. And you've got a son, Howie's age. Are you going to teach him to skin his own animal so that if he ever has to bring an offering, he's going to be able to do it? Why? It doesn't tell you to do it in here.
Yeah.
You see how the understanding is not that far-fetched for us to grasp when we start considering all of the implications of what is being said. I learned how to skin an animal from Carrie. I had no idea how to do it before he showed me. And then he taught me, and I got all bloody and dirty and all that stuff doing it myself. I mean, that's how I learned. I'd never done it before I came here.
But back in the days, I'm just thinking that at Howie's age, he would already be proficient at it.
He would already be, absolutely.
And like Jacob and Stephen, they'd just be at the infancy stage of learning how to tend it.
That's right, but they'd be in the stage still, even at this age. You're absolutely correct.
They'd be already
You'd already know how to sharpen knives.
Yeah, that's right. You'd already know how to sharpen knives. That's a good point.
wouldn't have Dad's overseeing while he's doing it. Jacob and Stephen, on the other hand, would have the instructions from Alex to teach them how to.
Actually, in this society, Howie would already be old enough to be given responsibility for tending the sheep for a watch on his own. And he had already been trained how to use the rod and the staff to protect those sheep. That's how far along he'd be in that society. We are so far behind previous societies in training up our kids, I couldn't even begin to explain to you. And we get further and further behind the more we dull their senses with useless activities. So, yes, you're exactly correct, Jack. The investment would have been made in practical, profitable endeavors to where they would become proficient at it much sooner than we are.
Family and cultural support.
Correct. And yeah, it's not just done, the plan is not executed just by one person, because Lee's point is correct. Family and cultural support. The village plays a role in making sure this happens. The men know who is doing what and who's capable of what, and they've got their family members in different stages, and it's layered to make this happen on purpose. And they're all working together to make it happen.
I was looking for
Yes.
an example of people by faith going when doing what Jesus said. I was looking for the one where the 10 went, or 7, and they dipped in the river and they're clean, and only one came back. But they had proof. But in looking for that, I found over here the leper is cleansed.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, go and do this just as Moses commanded. So you got to know this stuff even up here
That's right.
to get healed. Go and do as Moses to make a testimony to them. So
That's right.
They didn't pull their Bible out.
no,
Who was Moses?
And if people are just reading the New Testament also, they would ask that question, well, who's Moses? What was he telling them? So
Yeah, people coming in our day today, just reading the New Testament, are completely unarmed to be able to carry out what God's talking to them about. Because there's so much they're missing. And when we just read the New Testament, we can be contaminated by all sorts of false teachings, because what we end up doing is esteeming someone high enough where we put our faith in them rather than God. And that becomes a problem. So, the person who brings the offering is then supposed to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. So, you bring the offering, you lay your hand on the head of the animal, slit its throat, skin the hide off, and then cut it up into pieces. Okay? Now you present it to the sons of Aaron. The priest shall put fire on the altar and lay the wood in order on the fire. You realize one of the purposes of this being so involved and so personally participated in is to help you understand the gravity of the situation. So it's not taken as a trivial circumstance. Not only is this a bloody, involved process, but guess what you brought?
Your prize bull.
Your prize bull. You got it. You just lost your number one bull. Not your... Willingly. That's exactly correct.
But in the blood, I mean, there's a lot of foreshadow in that you shed the blood, caused the blood to be shed.
That's right. You caused the blood to be shed. That's right.
On the perfect offering that I gave you, because God gives us all things, so there's a lot in that.
There's a tremendous amount that we're to be taught.
Go get a bull, cut it up, and that's where you go to what Alex was saying, where they were just going and grabbing something and bringing it. And
that's where 4 or 5 weeks ago when Tim was talking about why does God say He didn't require these burnt offerings and sacrifices. This is what he's talking about. What he's saying is, I didn't require just the superficiality of bringing burnt offerings and sacrifices. You were supposed to get the point. The lesson was supposed to be learned, and you shouldn't have had to continue to bring so many to me, because it wasn't just a superficial ritual.
And so
it was intended to make transformation take place.
And Jesus expected it of him here, because he says, as Moses commanded, go to the priest and do it this way.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. You're talking about it. They shouldn't have been doing it constantly, like over and over and over again, having to bring all these sacrifices. For
certain ones. This one's not a sin sacrifice.
Okay. Well, in that case, but all these sacrifices are going to be of, the best of their herd, the ones without blemish.
Right.
And they'd be trying to keep those to a minimum.
Let me rephrase. When I say this is not a sin sacrifice, I mean it's not a sacrifice because something you did. Okay? It actually is a sin sacrifice, but it's not sin that you've done. This sacrifice is really intended for the original sin that comes from Adam. Okay? He's later going to give you sacrifices for your own personal sin and your own personal trespasses. Okay? And that's shortly going to follow. And you will understand that there's a sequence in which these were to be made too. You never brought a burnt sacrifice first if you had a sin offering or a trespass offering to offer. It was always the sin and trespass offering before the burnt offering.
Leave your gift at the altar and go take care of.
That's exactly correct. Okay? Back to verse 7. The sons of Aaron, the priests, shall put fire on the altar and lay the wood in order on the fire. Then the priests, Aaron's sons, shall lay the parts, the head and the fat in order on the wood that is on the fire upon the altar. But he shall wash its entrails and its legs with water. The priest shall burn all on the altar as a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. Pardon me? Oh. If his offering is of the flocks, of the sheep or the goats, as a burnt sacrifice, he shall bring a male without blemish. He shall kill it on the north side of the altar before the Lord. Why the north side? I cannot tell you. I have no idea. I don't know. No, I don't. Don't know the answers to why it's the north
Well,
side.
the north side was the door of the tabernacle, wasn't it?
No, that's the east side.
Oh.
So you enter from the east, and why does it need to be killed on the north? I cannot answer you. I can think of a practical potential reason. When you walked in the door, if the altar was off to the right, if you had the sacrifices on the south side, they'd be in the midst of anybody else coming into the court, so they'd be in the way. So the north side may have been out of the traffic path. But beyond that, I honestly can't give you an answer as to why it's the north side. Honestly, but God doesn't tell us, and I've looked, I've thought about it,
What about what Bailey just said? Where is Christ seated?
At the right hand of the Father.
And so where would the sacrifice be?
Seated at the right hand of the Father.
So on the right hand of the Jesus altar was the sacrifice. That might be a good...
Yep, you might be right, sweetheart. That might be a good idea.
Wait, all she said was Jesus.
Yeah, I know, but Carrie carried it on, and that's fine. But that may be correct. Maybe it is symbolic, because literally if you walk in from the east side and the west is over there, the north side is on your right hand. So maybe she's got it right. Maybe that's the position of where Jesus sits, the lamb that was sacrificed. So it's sacrificed at his right hand. That's very possible, but my answer still is I can't tell you definitively. But that sounds like a great answer, Bailey.
We'll go with that.
Next, Bailey, next Sunday you'll teach Leviticus chapter 2.
You'll know the answer good too.
So, verse 10. If his offering is of the flocks, of the sheep, of the goats, as a burnt offering, he shall bring a male without blemish. He shall kill it on the north side of the altar before the Lord and the priests.
But he says that, though. He says that he's going to kill it before the Lord and the priests.
Right. Well, before the Lord means in the presence of the Lord. And the Lord has his presence in the tabernacle, and this altar is outside of the front of the tabernacle. So it doesn't matter which side, it's still before the Lord.
And from his perspective, it means the left.
But here's the next piece is, did he tell you what, from the Lord's perspective, it's his left side, but nevertheless, if he has a side there. So anyway, the interesting part of this is, he doesn't tell you what side to kill the bull on, does he?
No.
Where should you kill the bull?
At the door of the tabernacle.
At the door of the tabernacle meeting, at the altar, on what side? It's the north side, because all the burnt offerings will be killed on the same side. He's just now giving you the next piece, you see, that he didn't give you in the first animal. All of them would have been killed in the same place. It's not that bulls are on the left and goats and sheep are on the right. Okay? Verse 11, he shall kill it on the north side of the altar before the Lord, before Yehovah, and the priests, Aaron's sons, shall sprinkle its blood all around the altar. There's an interesting thought to hear. Now look, he's taken time to tell us that they're supposed to do this. So what should you be asking yourself when you read that?
Why are they positioned the way they are?
What is God revealing about himself?
He likes details.
He likes barbecue.
So there's a purpose. So now you got to think back. What has he said the significance of the blood is?
Atonement? Is that?
Well, that's what it will do, but what is the significance of the blood?
The life is.
Yes, ma'am. The life is in the blood. So by sprinkling the blood of the sacrifice, you're sprinkling the life around the altar. You're demonstrating what you're bringing is life. What did they just do? Killed an animal. What's their thinking going on? Death. What is God trying to teach them?
Life goes on.
That through the death of this animal, life will come. Through the death of the sacrifice. And therefore we understand through the death of Christ that life will come. Okay? Furthermore, through our own death, life will come. Throughout the New Testament, you are not just encouraged, you are instructed and required to die to yourself and be resurrected in Christ. That is the essence of baptism. The figurative dying to yourself, going under the water, and coming out up from the water is life now in Christ. How does that life in Christ take place? The old man must die. Otherwise, there's no life in Christ.
The former self.
The former self. That means your paradigm from within. The way you focused your mind and your heart and your soul. Those now have taken a complete turn. Instead of serving yourself on the throne, you have a new person on the throne. That's Jesus. And your greatest desire is to be pleasing in His sight. And the only way you can do that is come to Him and get the plan, hear Him, and do what He says. By faith. Life is in the blood. Verse 12, and he shall cut it into pieces with its head and its fat, and the priest shall lay them in order on the wood that is on the fire upon the altar. But he shall wash the entrails and the legs with water. Then the priest shall bring it all and burn it on the altar. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, sweet aroma to the Lord. And if the burnt sacrifice of his offering to the Lord is of birds, then he shall bring his offering of turtle doves or young pigeons. Now, what he is doing is he's laying out a progression of so that all people can be included. Where would you get a bull from?
A herd.
What is the condition of someone who has a herd? Rich. Where would you get goats or sheep from? A herd or right? What is the indication of somebody who has a herd of goats or sheep? You see, when Jacob came back from Syria down to Canaan, God said he was very, very wealthy. And how he described that was by all the animals that were in his herd. How many birds did he name? 0. How do you come up with the pigeons? They're just there in the land and you go catch them. See, you don't have to be wealthy at all to bring a bird. You don't have to have 1 copper coin. You just have to have the ability to get up and go out and catch one and bring it for an offering. 2 actually in this case. And you have to own nothing. But that would require effort on your part, you see. Something that would have to be predetermined by you, that's something you're going to do, and you're not going to be dissuaded from it. If the burnt offering, verse 14, of his offering, if the burnt sacrifice of his offering to Yehovah is of birds, then he shall bring his offering of turtle doves or young pigeons. The priest shall bring it to the altar, wring off its head, and burn it on the altar. Its blood shall be drained out at the side of the altar. And he shall remove its crop with its feathers and cast it beside the altar on the east side into the place for ashes. So which side of the altar was the place for ashes? Apparently the east side. Do you think that changed if it was a bull or a goat or a sheep? No, all the ashes were on the east side. One of the reasons why they didn't slaughter on the east side, because that's where the ashes were. Why would that be a good idea, practically speaking?
Well, you could corrupt the carcass if you slaughtered it on the ash side.
Well, you corrupt the carcass potentially and make it defiled. That would be one good reason why. But what's a practical reason why you would put the ashes on the east side.
That's where your entrance is.
Correct. That's where the door is to go in and go out. If you're going to be hauling ashes from 1 million plus people, how many ashes do you think you're going to have? You going to have your little tote bucket? I don't think so. Okay, you're going to have carts that you're going to make, and they're going to be filled with ashes and be hauled out. So you potentially are going to even bring animal-drawn carts in to fetch ashes and take them out.
Now we know why it's a desert.
Yeah, now we know it's a desert, lots of ashes.
Lots of offerings, burnt offerings, fire, wood.
Verse 17, then he shall split it at its wings, but shall not divide it completely, and the priest shall burn it on the altar, on the wood that is on the fire. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. What does it mean that it's a sweet aroma to the Lord? God was pleased. That's right. So if we do what he said, the way he said, now, what would happen, as Jeff rightly pointed out, somebody who has a herd and has a prize bull, what do you think would happen if that person brought 2 turtle doves?
They would be looked at as scams.
You're exactly correct.
The offering is below your status.
Yes.
What are you doing?
What would it be a demonstration of the response that person was giving to God?
Lack of respect for the Lord.
Yeah, it'd be disrespectful to the Lord. That's exactly right. You see, what you're not doing now, in every case, these offerings, don't forget this, in every case, these offerings were their very best. The number one quality. Best bull, best sheep, best goat, and if you had nothing, you went out.
Still play your drum.
Yeah, that's right. You still play your drum, but come on in, but don't come in empty-handed.
Jesus addressed that with the woman with the mite.
And Jesus addressed it with the woman with the 2 mites. You follow? And so these are lessons to be learned. Now, we can take the lessons and we can confine them in our minds to limited capacities, or we can understand them in the way that they were supposed to be intended and expand them to include all of our life, all of our time, and all that he has given to us. That means your health, your senses, your mind, your relationships, everything is to abide by these principles.